fans, welcome back to Room 237 for yet another review of a film by IFC Midnight. Kind of a mini marathon that I've been doing. There's a ton of them on Hulu. Like I say in every video for these so far, IFC is my absolute favorite company when it comes to modern horror. Everything I look for in modern horror, they pretty much seem to nail. Even their, and yes, there are the exceptions, Cabin Fever remake, Dracula 3D, but by and large, they make exactly what I look for in recent horror films. Beaten only by A24, which I love them for the same reason. And this is for a film that I watched on Hulu, and part of me wishes I waited until December, because it's not really a Christmas movie, but Christmas is kind of the backdrop. And it's from 2019, and it is I Trapped the Devil, which is the directorial debut of Josh Lobo, who also wrote and produced the film. And it stars A.J. Bowen, who is a character actor that's been in a lot of horror movies. I mean, on top of my head, Creepshow 3, Hatchet 2, House of the Devil, You're Next, The Sacrament. Yeah, he been in quite a bit, and I've always enjoyed him in everything I've seen him in. Scott Poitras, if I pronounce that correctly, he steals the film. His performance, I thought, was excellent. And Susan Burke. You get minor roles by a few other people, like Chris Sullivan, who pretty much does a voice in a very brief scene in A Vision. But those three characters, or those three actors, that's our cast. This is another movie that is very limited with cast and setting. Overall concept, like the core concept, is very simple. And when it comes simplicity like that, I'm a huge sucker for. It all takes place in this one house. We don't even really see outside the house. Yeah, I don't know if it's Christmas Eve or near Christmas, but yeah, it just so happens to take place around Christmas. It's not built around Christmas, like, say, Black Christmas or Silent Night, Deadly Night, or even Gremlins or anything like that. It's more so incidental. Although it does play into the plot somewhat. But it's another slow burn film that is heavy on atmosphere. Tons of atmosphere and mood. Relies more on the suspense. And if I had to compare it to something, or what it reminded me of, well, one, it's very similar and reminiscent of the season 2 episode of Twilight Zone, The Howling Man, which, the plot in that is someone who captures the devil and the moral dilemma of what to do next. That's the story here. A.J. Bowen plays a guy named Matt, and he's with his wife Karen, who's played by Susan Burke. They go to see Matt's brother Steve, played by Scott Poitras, unannounced. And when they get there, he seems a little off. And that's when he reveals to them that he has he's trapped the devil, and he's down in the cellar. And what do we do now? But other than that Twilight Zone episode, which it does do a very good job at capturing that tone, which even the poster says this is a a must see for Twilight Zone fans. Twilight Zone is my favorite show. And yeah, it's not Twilight Zone-y in the fact that there's a twist, but just having that very thought-provoking sort of moral story. It had a very suspenseful build-up. Um, I would also compare it to It Comes at Night, where with that it was zombies or infected. Here it's supposedly having the devil down in the cellar, but we don't see anything. The scares and the suspense is more about the paranoia, the whether you can trust or distrust certain people around you, the moral dilemma of is this a poor man that's trapped down there? Do I go along with my brother on this? Or do I free this guy? Also, the questioning of one's spiritual beliefs. The the suspense is more built on that, just the tense, the intensity of the situation. No jump scares. There's not one jump scare. And I have to say, of all the IFC films that I've seen recently in the last couple weeks, whether it be ones that I've reviewed, like The Other Lamb, The Wind, The Feast, ones that I've seen but haven't reviewed yet, like Rent-A-Pal, Trespassers, and there's one other one I watched, but I can't remember it. This one has to be my favorite. This one is everything I love about a good, low-budget, independent horror film, and just what I look for in modern horror in general. It all takes place in this one house over a few hours. A very simple concept that, it's also very ambiguous. It's more, the less you see, the scarier it is. There are a couple of genuinely creepy scenes when the voice behind the door comes through, and which I'll get into about the voice, but the performances are excellent, and it's very thought-provoking. I mean, what would you do in that situation? Would you trust your brother? Would you be able to believe this unbelievable story? Also, it also reminded me of like a Ty West film, specifically House of the Devil, which I don't know if they were setting out to make a film reminiscent or homaging these mid to late 70s, early 80s, like House of the Devil. But it did have that feel as well, especially with the music, which was done by Ben Lovett, who also did the music for The Ritual, which is another one of my favorite horror films of the 2010s. Loved The Ritual. And he also did The Night House, which came out just recently, which I still need to see. It's this very ominous, almost Chainsaw Massacre-y type score that really helps to build up quite a bit. It also has its stylish parts, like Steve, the brother, keeps having visions of his dead wife within the TV static, and just the way that's done is very neat looking. It does have some kind of or this other vision that he has of his wife blindfolded. It's this very David Lynchian kind of setup where it's just all black and seemingly infinite, but there's just like this red light cast on her characters, which the lighting is superb in this film. It really helps the atmosphere out quite a bit. I mean, upstairs you had the lights of the Christmas tree, which does kind of give like a Black Christmas type atmosphere. just this big kind of cozy a grandparent kind of house, because I believe it's their grandparents' house, but Steve lives in it. It also got newspapers all over the windows. It seemingly looking like he's going crazy, and we find out that he's still in the process of grieving his wife and daughter, which it's hinted at, but then not revealed till way later. That's as much as spoilers I'm gonna get into. But yeah. So it's also one of those movies that is he crazy? Is that really the devil? It does kind of like The Shining, kind of gives scenes of evidence for both theories. But it could also be interpreted a number of different ways, especially the final scene. But it does lean heavier towards one direction. But when you get down to the cellar, it's lit up all red, like a photography darkroom, and I love the look of it. It's also very ambiguous, which I appreciate. Ambiguous and vague. It's not really a spoiler, but I mean, the fact that we don't see the devil, the scenes where the voice is talking to Karen, we just see the door. We just see the door. It doesn't have a shot of someone behind it trying to look scary or trying to look like a demon or the devil, which they don't call him Satan at all. They just call him the devil. And I think Steve even refers to it as her at one point, which again, when I get into that, it can be interpreted probably a number of ways. But it doesn't spoon feed you a bunch of stuff and show you everything. It leaves it ambiguous enough to build intrigue and make it creepier. Kind of like the Jaws and Blair Witch effect. What you don't see is scarier. And great character development too. I mean, Matt and Karen really go through these arcs where as to their stance on whether they believe Steve or not. They go through these arcs, and again, Scott Poythress, who plays Steve, does a wonderful job. He goes from just being very quiet and off to being very kind of not really manic, but very excited to explain his theories, to really sad and broken, to just distraught and beside himself and kind of snapped. He, performance-wise, he steals the film, but all three actors do a great job. And again, I love the cinematography, the sound design, which the only thing I'll say about the sound design is, I don't know if this was intentional, but the two scenes we get when Karen is standing in front of the door, which the door has a homemade cross put on it, which when that's removed, it seems like that's when the person behind it is trying to bang on it and trying to communicate with the person on the other side. But especially the first scene, because I think we get 3 scenes of the voice coming through. You have the ominous music that's being built up, and the voice goes from being very soft and sounding desperate, but also sounding like it's trying to convince someone something. And it's like the music is almost louder, And I actually had to turn the subtitles on because even with the TV almost all the way up, I still couldn't make out what this voice was saying. And again, I don't know if this was just me, if this is just what I was hearing, or if this is actually what was going on. It goes from that quiet kind of desperate man's voice to, as the film goes on, it gets, more deeper, kind of not really guttural, but more of what you would expect the devil to sound like. But if that wasn't just me, and also getting louder. If that wasn't just me, and that is what was going on, it's very subtle, almost barely noticeable. It's not like, like that. The voice changes, which would have made it obvious. But also the voice does say things that, if it was the devil, that's probably what the devil would say. And those scenes are genuinely creepy. Those are the scariest parts of the movie, where it's just this sort of upward shot of Karen holding a hammer to try to break the locks off. I don't remember if it's zooming in or pulling back, and then just a shot of the door as we hear the voice come out. And especially when we just hear the sort of wheezing laughter behind the door. It's with the red lighting and the atmosphere and just the idea of the concept of this possibly being the devil and not knowing what this being looks like. It actually is genuinely creepy. And even though it is a slow burn, it never feels like it drags. Like, this isn't like a clock watcher movie where you're kind of like, is this going to pick up soon? It actually, it's a slow burn, but it goes at a good pace, which, probably because I was very interested in it. It's a very intriguing story. It pulls you in. You get great scenes, like when Steve is trying to convince Matt, and he's kind of explaining his theories. Like, there's this book that he shows him that explains evil is this tangible force that's broken up into two categories, which is, I think this is like man versus man evil, which is when man does something evil to someone for a reason, or driven to for a reason. Greed, wrath, lust, vanity. And then there's pure evil, which is doing evil to someone for the sake of seeing them suffer. Then he takes them up to this peaked room that is just covered with newspaper articles and missing person flyers, and this red string all over the place. I mean, it looks like an obsessive madman has just been trying to connect all these dots. And he says, since the devil has been trapped downstairs, it seems like all senseless evil has seemed to be solved, or seems to be solving itself. Like, missing people just show up, unharmed. And how eventually more things could be solved, and maybe the senseless evil could be eradicated if he keeps them down there forever. And pretty much what he kind of proposes to Matt is, if this kind of evil makes up 99.9% of all the evil shit in the world, even that 0.01% that we'd be stopping could still save millions of lives or end suffering and pain for millions of people. How do you say no to that? That's basically what he proposes. He also talks a lot about, if you don't believe me, or he says you can believe it's the devil by feeling the evil when you go down there. And when Karen goes down there for the first time, and she grabs the hammer and goes to undo the locks, and then she hesitates, you see her kind of pull back. That's when she feels it, and then that's when she kind of shifts. That's when she's still obviously by default sticking with Matt, but she's starting to trust where Steve is coming from. That's as far as I'm going to go for spoilers as far as the characters. But this movie actually did have some really good character development that I was impressed by. And it does have its stylish moments that, when it does get a little, I was going to say too supernatural, but it really doesn't. Especially when you realize that these more stylish, fantastic scenes are just visions, like Steve seeing his wife in the TV, or that other vision when he's transported to the black infinite with the red light, seeing his blindfolded wife, and then seeing the man, this long-haired guy, holding a stuffed animal bunny in half that's bleeding. He's like, help, I can't stop the bleeding. And then he's whisked away to that other. It's just a vision. So it's not like it's totally supernatural. And again, it does help play into the whole, is he driving himself crazy? Which he does say that the devil that's down there was somehow able to, I don't know if he uses the word manifest, or was able to take the form of a man, a man that can be, held and captured. It doesn't say how he came across this, or when, or how, which I'm glad. We don't need to be spoon-fed everything, and it doesn't matter. I guess I'll get into spoilers, but yeah, I definitely recommend this movie. I know there will be people, and I say this for almost every IFC and A24 film, or at least a lot of them. There will be people that just don't like slow burn horror, and they'll be saying it's just a drama with thriller elements. It's not a horror movie, because it is a slow burn that is built more on atmosphere and suspense and the moral dilemma amongst the characters. That's where the horror lies. There are no jump scares, which, excellent. Not one jump scare. Even if there was one, I would have said that it was earned. I mean, if there was a scene where someone is standing in front of the door and the voice is talking to them and the camera's holding, and then we just see the door just bang and the locks rattle. It was so tense and so well built up that I would have said that was earned. But it doesn't. So, yeah. And it's everything I look for in a modern, recent horror film. Love the pacing. Love the simplicity of it. One setting, a few characters, great performances, a thought-provoking story, and I hardly ever comment on script, because normally, just for whatever reason, I've never singled out a script to say the script was great. The script for this was actually pretty good, because I feel like this would have been an easy concept to screw up. Kind of like another movie that I'll be reviewing called Rent-A-Pal. It's a concept that could just be very silly or very boring. And it had a strong enough script with strong enough actors to make it compelling and interesting. But it's on Hulu, and if you really like more atmospheric, tense, foreboding horror films, definitely check it out. I loved this movie. Of all the IFC films I've watched recently, this one is now my favorite. It's kind of like the It Comes at Night of IFC mixed more with like House of the Devil. And it does have that 70s feel to it. I loved the opening credits as well, had this cool font. Even also, it was also made by a company called Yellow Veil, which is an obvious reference to Giallo because the logo is a yellow triangle with a black gloved hand with a knife. So that's cool. The title screen is I Trap the Devil with the font, and then like the copyright down at the bottom. Very 70s feel. Again, plenty ambiguous. I'm sure it can be interpreted very different ways, but at least the end. But I'm gonna get the spoilers now because I'm rambling because I really like this film. But spoilers now. Another thing that's left pretty ambiguous is Steve continues to get these phone calls where when he answers, you can tell he's deeply affected, but we don't ever hear the voice. He doesn't say who it is or what they want. Matt does ask him at one point, and he just says, I think someone's coming for him. That's the extent of the explanation for the phone calls, which again, excellent. Oh, one thing I did mention, this does have one trope, one modern horror cliche that I am tired of, but the movie was just so good, I kind of forgot about it. It does open up with the ending, and then before we see too much, it cuts back, and then we work forward. Whatever. So, at one point, Matt, trying to further understand Steve's theories, he goes back up into that room with all the paper clippings, and he sees one article that says, Christmas crash, kills, father grieves, talking about Steve's wife and daughter. They were killed during the holiday season, and he's still grieving. And Matt seems to think that he's driving himself crazy, he needs help, and this whole trying to free the world of evil is kind of his way of trying to get them back or come to terms with it in some way. That's sort of Matt's final answer. One thing that does kind of really show that this is the devil or some evil force behind the door when talking to Karen is when she does hesitate with the hammer. We hear the voice say, you hesitate. Why? Oh, I get it. Does it have to do with what I did to them? And then we get sort of this wheezing laugh that again, without the physical person seeing them laugh, and just having it just be this door in this dark cellar with the laugh coming from behind it, very eerie. And then the voice addresses her as Karen, like, open the door, Karen. So, if it is open to interpretation, I do think it was the devil. But it goes in such a realistic, ambiguous, as little supernatural as possible way of going about it. So, but it's at that point where Karen feels the evil and agrees with Steve, which in the very beginning, when he tells and shows them what he's done, Karen is just, no matter what, no. To hell with him. He's on his own. We can't be a part of this. In no way. Like, I will not budge from this. But then by the end of the film, she kind of takes over for Steve, because as Steve has that vision where he sees his wife, not in the TV but in person, he goes to shoot her, I'm guessing to stop the vision, but then that's when he's pulled out of his vision and he's actually standing in the living room pointing it at Matt and Karen. He does surrender the gun, but when Matt takes it, he goes down to the cellar to free the guy. And even Karen tries to stop him, saying, I can't explain it the way he does, but I feel what he's talking about, and I do think he's right. There's an altercation between Steve and Matt in front of the door where, Steve tells Matt that he doesn't rely on faith or anything, so of course he doesn't believe and just trust him. Matt tries to tell him, this is all because of your wife and daughter. No matter what you do, you'll never bring them back. Nothing's bringing them back. Everything you've done since has been because of them or for them, and it hasn't done you any good. So when Steve won't move out of the way, Matt goes forward, and Steve stabs him in the stomach. So, distraught, he goes upstairs, and this is the part of his performance where he's just snapped. He was kind of sitting there like, he's facing the window, and he's just, wouldn't move. I did what I had to do. I just, so out of it. But again, he goes through a range of different emotions and ways of doing this character, and all of them are just as believable. The whole time he's explaining, how he had to do it, and I know you felt it too. I know you're on my side. Karen's in the background, out of focus, and we just slowly see her just raise the pistol, shot from outside. We hear the bang, so she shot him. But then we catch up, and the two police officers come over. They go in, and one of them sees a creepy Santa in the TV static. But then one of them comes across Steve, a bloody mess in the kitchen, goes down to the cellar, sees Karen, and Karen is so far on Steve's side that they shoot each other because the cop was going to open the door. But then the other cop goes down, and dying Karen is shaking her head no at him because the voice is begging to be let out. So, yeah, I think she just shot Steve out of, response for killing her husband, but still believes that he has the devil and for the greater good, he's got to stay trapped. So her arc was, she literally went from, no matter what, no, I'm not budging, your brother's crazy, we can't be a part of this, our normal life is out the window if we are a part of this, to shooting a police officer so he stays away from the door. But the other officer opens it, and a very slow, suspenseful scene, because even though that one vision with the long-haired guy holding the stuffed rabbit, I'm guessing is what the driver of the accident is. Also, it's hinted at that the person you see in that room is who you think is evil. Because that's another thing that Matt says is, he may be the devil to you for what happened, but he's not the devil, and you're not helping the world in any way. But when the cop opens the door, very slowly it opens, and we just see two little feet walk out with proper dress shoes. It's a little girl in a black dress. Now, I don't know, it could be interpreted as she sort of represents Steve's daughter, since we saw his wife in visions also. It could be what this cop sees as evil. It could just be a creepy image. It could be, maybe that's how the devil is trying to portray himself, an innocent little girl in a black dress. But she just walks out, goes upstairs. The cop stands there staring at the empty room. Then we get a shot of outside through the window, and the girl just runs by. And then that's the end of the movie. So I'm sure it can be interpreted a number of different ways. I'm sure none of them are wrong, but people will still correct me and say, well, you really ought to go back and watch it. You really ought to go back and watch it a second time so that you know and understand, like I do, like a lot of comments I get. I've seen this 2 or 3 times already. I watched it once, and then a few days went by. I wanted to watch it again, and so I did. And then like another day went by, and I couldn't. I didn't have time to make the video, so then I watched it a third time. But the third time wasn't so much of a refresher as it was, I just really enjoyed the movie, and I wanted to sort of be on that high of watching it for the review. So I loved this movie. Other than that one trope of starting out with the end, then cutting back and working forward, that a lot of new horror movies do that I can't stand, this has everything I look for. I mean, I love the cinematography. Everything about it is limited or simplistic, except for the concept. Well, actually, the concept is too, but the way it goes about it and how everything relies on the suspense within it. A very limited setting, takes place in one house, very limited cast. You got 3 characters. Just the tension and paranoia and distrust between the characters of what to do, and the moral dilemma and how their own spiritual beliefs are tested with enough ambiguity to kind of see, well, who was right and who was wrong, but also enough hints and answers to be like, well, I think that was the devil, because there's also no way that voice came out of that little girl. But also great music, great ominous, moody music, ominous, atmospheric, moody lighting. Just and the slow burn pacing, I think, was for the benefit of character development, story, suspense. It wasn't just slow. Like it was for the benefit of all the other parts. And this is the kind of horror movie I look for newer horror films. And another reason why I love IFC, and like I said, of the IFC films I've seen recently, this one is now my favorite. I loved this movie. I thought it was great. But I have some more IFC films that I want to get to. There's some more A24 films as well, but so I know I want to do a Rent-A-Pal and Trespassers at some point. Oh, and I also saw The Cured, which was a very surprising zombie movie. But so yeah, stay tuned for those and just more IFC and A24 films. And thank you for watching.